Prepare to be captivated by the business story of the week, hosted by me, Shaheen Shan. Join us on a journey through the twists and turns of entrepreneurial triumphs and setbacks. Immerse yourself in the narrative and witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. This is Business Story of the Week.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua. And like today, like many other days, we unravel the real side of business, which is stories, the true fabric of life. We unravel stories of success, of struggles, of perseverance. And we invite leaders, the best of the best, the brightest, and, you know, really inspiring thought leaders to motivate you in your entrepreneurial and business journey, but not just in that journey, but also in life. Today, we have a guest for you, ladies and gentlemen, to our audience and listeners today. I'm excited to have Liz Wiseman on here, the CEO of Wiseman Group. Liz Wiseman is a researcher and executive advisor who teaches leadership to the top organizations in the world. She wrote the New York Times bestsellers called Multipliers, The Multiplier Effect, and the Wall Street Journal bestseller Rookie Smarts and Impact Players. We're going to get into some of those books in this episode. And she is also the CEO of the Wiseman Group, a leadership research and development firm headquartered in Silicon Valley, California. And some of her recent clients include Apple, AT&T, Disney, Meta, Google, Nike, Salesforce, Tesla, and X. Liz has also been consistently named one of the world's leading 50 management thinkers in its biannual rankings of Thinkers 50. Liz has conducted significant research in leadership and talent development. She writes for Harvard Business Review, Fortune, and Liz holds a bachelor's degree in business management and master's degree in organizational behavior from Brigham Young University. There's so much more that I didn't mention in there. It's so much more better to just talk about it. Liz, I am excited to have you on here. I am excited to have your knowledge, share your insight with us in here. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Well, thank you for having me. And Joshua, I should tell you that my youngest son, I am the mother of four, and my youngest is named Joshua. So
Oh,
I kind of love you already. Just
already. Oh, please. Oh, that's already a win for me. Liz, I will do my absolute best for this. And thank you for coming on here. Um, how old is Joshua? How young is Joshua?
he is 20, and that's my baby.
Oh, your youngest boy. It's always different for the youngest. Liz, talk to us a little bit about where it all began. I always like to start the story that way. Where did the story of Liz Wiseman begin? Do you always knew you were going to be a researcher? Do you always know that you were going to undertake this kind of leadership path in business management and dealing with, always dreamt of dealing with the biggest organizations and corporations around the world? Anything in your childhood happen, or maybe throughout your life's journey? What is the story of Liz Wiseman?
Mm. Well, I think from a young age, I became interested in figuring out how people tick and what makes
Right.
people um, unique and how to work with people. And I think from a very young age, I learned how to work with difficult people.
Right.
And that I had this amazing opportunity to learn this in my own home. I had a really difficult
Mhm.
father, and I had this
Mhm. Mhm.
wonderfully gracious mother, but a father who was grumpy and curt and just had this absolute gift for saying the wrong thing. Like,
Okay. Wow.
yeah, impolitic, like was one of his gifts. And a lot of people just I think a lot of people were afraid of him. He was never a physically abusive father in any way,
Mhm.
but people cowered around him and pulled
Mhm.
back and stayed away. And I
Mhm.
think I found my father fascinating, trying to figure out how to be with him and how to
Mhm.
have a relationship with him, how to interpret him. And I think a couple
Mhm.
things. I learned, and of course, you understand all of this in hindsight. Of course, none of
Of
this
course.
is clear
Yes.
to me as a little 8-year old, but in hindsight, I think it's where I developed the beginnings of my professional skill set of
Hmm.
figuring out how people work, figuring
Hmm.
out how to relate, figuring out how to deal with difficult people, figuring out how to stand
Hmm.
up to bullies, how to hold
Wow.
space and how to hold your own. And I think one of the gifts in this was that at a really early age, I learned to separate intent from impact
There you go.
because
Wow.
I looked at my father on the outside and I could just see this like grumpy guy who always said like the wrong thing or maybe the hurtful thing. But
Mhm.
for some reason, I could just see that wasn't really what he was trying to do. I could see he
Right.
was really trying to be loving and supportive. He just didn't have the vocabulary, the skill set. I don't know.
Right.
But that ability to see people's
Hmm.
intent and
Hmm.
separate it from the impact that they're having
Right.
and sort of see both the light and the dark, the like what happens in people's shadow
Yes, of course.
has really helped me in my research. It's helped me as an executive. It's helped me as a parent. It's it's kind of one of those things that turned out to be a blessing.
That's a beautiful way of seeing it, because I was going to say like, wow, how hard must it have been, right? But at the same time, your father was kind of like your first case study of like a behavioral, or a study, right? And your first kind of foray into wanting to. It really is a comes down to love, right? You must have loved your father tremendously, of course, to want to know why he reacts that way. And it's such a common story, I guess, especially for fathers from their decade, perhaps even fathers from, and even fathers, my father from his decade as well, is also quite not in tune with their emotions, so to speak. And it's
Hmm.
it's a difficult it's a difficult thing to grow up with, but even more beautiful to turn it into not just a career, but into a much bigger uh, thing that you do now, because you've turned it into organizational behavior. You've turned that, into a career of dealing with the top corporations in the world and having this kind of impact in the world. Liz, what was the first impact, or what was the first chance where you said, okay, what was the first opportunity rather, where you got into organizational business management? What was the first chance that you got and you said like, okay, this is it, I'd love to keep doing this, I'd love to be more involved into um, organizational behavior?
Mm. Well, I think I got interested in this field and this work when I took organizational behavior 321, which was part of
Hmm.
my undergraduate, and my professor was Dr. Carrie Patterson,
There you go.
who was the lead researcher and author for the Crucial Conversations book,
Hmm.
Crucial Confrontations, Influencer and Change Anything. And I I don't know if I fell in love with the field or the topic as much as I fell in love with watching Carrie teach. And
Wow.
he was outrageous and funny and witty. And it just like everyone loved going to his class. And
Wow.
I think I'm also the daughter of a mother who was a teacher and a school principal. So I saw that side of things. And I think it made me want to do something like that, to teach and to
Hmm.
be an educator. And it was about a couple years later when I was in graduate school, Kerry came back onto campus and he now had a company he was running and he was looking for an intern and he was only going to hire one person. And I have to say, Joshua, it was the only time in my entire life. And I've had like a 35-year career. Yeah, probably kind of going on
Hmm.
35 years. It was the only job I ever really wanted. Every
Oh
other
wow.
job, I'm like, you know what? I could do that. Like,
Maybe.
but I wanted to go work for Carrie, and I swear I used Jedi mind tricks in this interview
Oh, there
trying to
you
get him to
go.
hire me. And I said every stupid thing. And, I couldn't come up with any smart answers. I just felt like, oh, he's definitely not going to hire me. And he hired me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it was somehow some mind meld. And he kind of took a chance on me. And
Wow.
he, I think it gave me a lot of confidence. And I was an intern for him. And at the end of the summer, I
Mhm.
edited his work. I helped with building training courses. And I remember at the end of the summer, um, and I love to watch Carrie teach. He said, well, why don't you teach one of the workshops? And I'm like,
Wow.
no, I'm an
Oh.
intern.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Uh-huh.
behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Like, I'm helping him, but he was this masterful teacher. And I did refuse to teach. I was like, no, 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 no. And, I'm like a reasonable adult at this point. I'm in graduate school. But so I never did teach that workshop before I finished that internship for him, but he wanted me to, and he wanted to hire me after that. And
Mhm.
I think that gave me a lot of confidence. And it's one of the, my hopes is, I had so many mentors and people who just gave me opportunity and believed in me and asked me to do hard things. Um, that was probably one of them.
That's a
The
great
other,
story to tell. I love that. The other one would be.
well, when I joined, and I want to go back to Carrie because there was this lesson I
Please.
learned working for him that has served me my entire career. Um, I edited a lot of his work, and Carrie was
Uh-huh.
a brilliant writer, and I cannot
Mhm.
emphasize enough how brilliant he was. Carrie passed a couple years ago, and
Oh.
how much I admired his intellect.
Yes. Yes.
And so I would edit his work and, fix some things grammatically. And I got to this one paragraph that was just, it was just kind of a mess, a tangle of words. And I couldn't see a clear fix. So I just wrote AWK for awkward, the
Okay.
editorial term for awkward in the margin. So I was
Okay.
editing on paper by hand. And I finished up the rest of my edits and I went and left that on his desk. He had been out at lunch and I kind of just dropped it on his desk and I went back to my office and oh, I don't know, like 30 minutes later, I could tell Carrie is back from lunch and he has read the edits and he is marching down to my office. And I mean, it is like, he's stomping down to my office and he
Oh,
bursts
wow.
in and he shows me this document. He points to the AWK and he said to me, don't you ever give me an AWK without an FIX.
Right.
And then he kind of like made this really mad face and then like with the twinkle in his eye kind of tossed the paper back to me. And what he was saying is, don't just point out what
Mhm.
is awkward. Don't just point out what doesn't work. Like solve
Mhm.
the problem.
Exactly.
And in my mind, I'm like, well, Carrie will solve it because he's such a great writer. He just needs to know it's bad and needs to be solved.
Wow. Wow.
And so I took it back and, I worked a little harder,
Mhm.
fixed it, gave it back to him. And I have carried that teaching moment with me for decades. Like,
Wow.
don't give people problems, give people solutions. And I think a lot of the traction I've had in my work and career has come from just figuring out what's wrong and solving it rather than pointing it out or waiting for other people to solve it. And I owe
And if
that
that
moment to Carrie.
and if that isn't like a measure of excellent leadership, right? And a lot of the things that you talk about when you come to the business management side of things, the um, organizational behavior again, you talk a lot about the impact of leadership when it comes to thinking, and that it feels like that singular lesson that you've learned from Carrie has ballooned into this kind of impact that you've created in this field. You have one of your books is called The Multipliers, right? And it has such a profound impact. I remember you talking about it in one of your videos. You said there are leaders who become comfortable asking others to be uncomfortable. And these are what you call the
Mm.
multipliers. I love that line. And it sort of reminded me of your beloved mentor, Carrie. And could you talk to us a little bit about that? Could you talk to us the influence that of your beloved mentor, Carrie, going into your influence and the idea that came about when you wrote the book Multipliers?
Mm. Well, I think, Joshua, all of my multipliers were people who let me be really uncomfortable,
Hmm.
who asked me to do hard things and then
Yes,
didn't bail me out when they got hard and
beautiful.
had, I mean, when I look back, my retrospective of my career is a story of
Mhm,
people who gave me opportunities and believed
mhm,
in me and then
mhm.
didn't fix it for me.
Yes, yes.
Including my editor at HarperCollins, Hollis Heimbach, on this book. Like, she would point out what was good, point out anything that needed to be. It's like never stepped in and fixed it for me. Just always let me stay in this uncomfortable tension of my own mediocre work or my own learning
Hmm.
to figure it out to do really great work. You know, the book, the book itself, some people say it was my post Oracle therapy. I wanted to be a researcher and a professor. I
Hmm.
took a job out of my master's program with Oracle. I figured I'd work. It was a hot shot young software
Hmm.
company. I figured I'd work there a couple years and then
Hmm.
go back to school, get a PhD. I had a whole plan for that, or go work for a real company, because it
Yeah.
was this like quirky, weird thing run by this, visionary, mercurial founder, Larry Ellison.
Uh-huh.
And that's really where the idea of multipliers was born, because Oracle had a very clear hiring strategy back in the
Wow.
day, and they
Hmm.
hired people who were sort of wildly smart, like really, really smart, driven, achievement oriented people who were nice. Like, that was
Hmm.
this profile. And,
Wow.
when they had to compromise on those three criteria, it was usually nice that they compromised on. It was just a
Right.
bunch of brainiacs and driven, kind
Right.
of could crawl all over each other trying to win the trophy kind of environment. But I found myself just very fortunately surrounded by all these brilliant people.
Hmm.
And every day I'd come home, I'm like, I can't believe I get to work with these brilliant people.
Hmm.
And what I began to find as, as Oracle was hiring rapidly and growing rapidly, that as those brilliant people got put into leadership roles,
Hmm.
not all of them created brilliance around them. Like,
Yeah.
some
Wow.
people's intelligence became a barrier for the
Yes.
team,
Yes.
that
Yes.
like they were smart, but no one around them got to be smart. They were so,
Hmm.
like, they were so smart and so needed to be the smartest person in the room, that
Hmm.
they ended up and sometimes quite accidentally weaponizing their own intelligence.
Oh
And
wow.
then I saw other leaders who were equally smart, but like somehow smart people around them got to be smart, and
Hmm.
their intelligence was used more as a tool
There you go.
for growth and innovation and learning. And I just was fascinated. I watched this for well over a decade
Wow.
as I'm trying to figure out how to lead. I'm getting thrown into really big, hard leadership jobs, and I'm watching the diminishers and the multipliers around me.
Wow. Yes.
And that's where I really began to see this dynamic. And it was years later that I decided to do the research and ended up writing the book.
And that was one of the questions I was going to ask, by the way, is your time during Oracle. You started your career with Oracle. You were the vice president at Oracle University. If I'm not, correct me if I'm mistaken, a former executive at Oracle as well. And you eventually wanted, like you said, wanted to transition to becoming a renowned researcher, an executive advisor. Um, what prompted this shift, really? What was this deep want to be a researcher? And I love how you called it, the Multipliers book was your post Oracle therapy. Was it like, did I say that right? How did that experience, you kind of already mentioned or answered that, but how did that experience influence your approach to leadership, talent management, leadership development, and to now being the CEO of the Wise Man Group?
Hmm. Well, I did not leave Oracle to become a renowned researcher. That would be kind of ambition in hindsight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I've ever been a particularly ambitious person. I just like doing interesting work. And I
Wow.
am, as Ray Lane, the former president of Oracle, said, he says, Liz, you are a dog on a bone. And I think I am a little bit relentless. Like when I decide to do something, I kind of like lock in and really do it. But I left Oracle because I was bored. And, I had been there 17 years. I
Wow.
started when there were like 2,000 employees. I left when we were just shy of like 100,000 employees, and it had grown rapidly. And I think I was probably 24, almost 25 when I got thrown into my first management job. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
go build a university, make it work all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And every job I had after that was a stretch assignment. Every one of them was something I didn't know how to do that was a couple sizes too big. And they were all
Right.
jobs that I was growing into. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, at one point, I'm maybe a year or two into this, management career at Oracle, and my VP, Bob Shaver, was introducing me to someone at a cocktail party. It was some business event. And he said, this is Liz, like she runs Oracle University. And I'm
Right.
probably 25, 26 at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this client of Oracle, who was, a proper executive, with gray hair, and he just did a flinch, like he was shocked, like, what do you mean? She still looks like a university student. What do you mean
Oh
she's
wow.
running the corporate
Oh wow.
university? And Bob said, not particularly providing great air cover for me. He just laughed and he said, yeah, Liz is not particularly qualified for her job, but she's really
Wow.
good at it, blah, 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 blah. And I, said back to Bob, I said, Bob, who wants a job they're qualified for?
Right.
I don't want a job I'm qualified for. Like there'd be nothing to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and so I had, you know, 17 years of this kind of experience of having outsized jobs and opportunities and
Mm-hmm.
being uncomfortable. And I was really comfortable in
Right.
that space. And then, you get to a point where you're good at what you do and respected for what you do. And my job was big and hard, but easy.
Wow.
And
Big
that's
and
when I
hard, but
decided, you kind of gotta, my colleague Whitney Johnson has this, she looks at personal disruption based on Clay Christensen's work of,
mm-hmm.
innovation and disruption. But it's like Whitney says, you got to jump off one S curve and onto another. And
Yes. Yes.
I had been doing a series of S curves, but it was
Mm-hmm.
time to really, I left because I wanted to do something I didn't know how to do. And I was interested in doing some management research and knew just enough to get started, but not enough to do it well. So it was a new thing to learn. That's really how I got into it.
Wow. First of all, I wanted to highlight that moment there where you you were thrown into this role and no one really believed in you except Carrie. That was the first one where you said like you were an intern, right? And then you were told to do this speaking engagement and you said, "Nope, I can't do that," but they trusted you. And that's kind of like an example of a multiplier. But
Mm.
this other guy, correct me if I'm mistaken, I forgot his name, but he didn't really back you up, right? He didn't back you up on
He was just messing with me. Bob, he was one who
wow,
gave me the job, Bob
right?
Bushaver,
There you
and
go.
he gave me the job and absolutely believed in me. But he was
There
just
you go.
messing with me. He was
Yeah,
just,
yeah. I understand it was just messing with you, but um, it's one of those things that you mentioned in your Leadership Matters episode with Sean. You mentioned that one of the signs that people trust you is that they're willing to take a hit. And I think these are important factors when it comes to like um, getting into roles that you don't want and getting into like who wants a job that they're not qualified for, right? And that just reminded me of that line that you create or that you said on that episode. um, I want to talk about Liz. I want to talk about your other book, and you mentioned this about Your other book is called Impact Players book. It's titled
That's the
Impact
most
Players
recent.
for the most recent one for our audience and listeners out there. And you talked a bit about it a year ago, or rather, um, you mentioned it at one of Tiffany Boba's live LinkedIn. So I'm trying to remember all of this, right? And you mentioned you were talking about ambiguity, and when there's ambiguity, what do you do as an impact player? You ask people, because when there's ambiguity, there's you mentioned if there's a low situation confidence but high self confidence, learning happens, innovation
Mm.
happens, and growth happens, and value is created. And you also described impact players as when there's ambiguity, impact players move towards them. And I remember you using the wave metaphor. Are you going to
Mm.
surf the wave? Are you going to dive into the wave? Or are you going to turn and run? Talk to us a little bit about that. Talk to us about this concept of impact players when it comes to leadership management, and what was the inspiration that came behind that after you writing about multipliers and now to writing the book, your most recent book, Impact Players.
Oh, well, the origin of the book in some ways was a comment made during a workshop I was teaching up at Salesforce
Oh
up in
wow,
San
interesting.
Francisco. And, I'm teaching these engineering managers and various managers across the company how to be leaders who multiply and amplify intelligence in others, how to be a leader who gets all of people's capability,
Mhm.
and, um, you know, to be a leader around people do their best work around.
Yes.
And someone, kind of raised his hand and said, I get it. I want to be a multiplier, but you can't multiply zero.
Hmm.
I'm like, hmm.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
I'm thinking probably, Joshua, what you're thinking, and probably what everyone listening is thinking,
Hmm.
is he's talking about, like, I want to be a good leader, but I got a bunch of dummies working for me. I can't multiply zero. And, that's going to bait me into a little lecture. And, I was kind of winding up to give him a little lecture ed about, I get it. Not everyone in the world is a genius, but everyone on your team has intelligence, and everyone has something that they're brilliant at. And as a leader, your job is to find that and put that to work and to use it and to challenge it and, grow that intelligence and talent on your team. I was about to say that when he goes on to say, I get it. As a leader, I need to show up with the right mindsets and the right
Of course.
practices
Of
to
course.
create an environment where people can be smart and successful and have impact.
Hmm. Hmm.
But so do the people on my team.
Right.
And that really is what intrigued me, spurred me into looking at what is the talent side of the equation. Like, I know what leaders do to bring
Hmm.
out people's best and
Hmm.
to create environments where people can have a big impact in their work.
There you go.
But what are the mindsets and practices of
Hmm.
the talent of the contributors on the team? And what is it that the impact players of the workplace do differently than other really good team players? And so, what I
Hmm.
was trying to do is to separate out not low performers from high performers, but the difference between solid contributors, people doing a good job
Hmm.
at their job, and people having extraordinary impact and influence. And what were they doing differently? And how did they think differently?
Right.
And when I looked at this difference, it had everything to do with how they handle situations fraught with uncertainty and
Wow.
ambiguity,
Uh-huh.
and what they do when it's messy. For example, one of the differences is that the ordinary contributor, or I should better say, when we are in ordinary contributor mode,
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
tend to do our job when there are messy problems
Yes.
around.
Yes.
But the impact players do the job that needs to be done.
That needs to be
Like,
done precisely.
they're not just doing their job, and they're not just like following their passion. They're
Hmm.
figuring out what's the most important work of the organization and what is the biggest problem, and how do I go and solve that problem. So
Right.
they hold their job description very lightly.
Right.
It's not a boundary, it's sort of a base camp.
So, wow, this a lot to unwrap right there. But before we really get into it, with impact players, you mentioned that there are specific kind of mindset that allows you to deal with that kind of uncertainty. Is there a particular strategy or a particular idea that you could share with us as audience and listeners right there? In fact, a success story might be nice actually, but is there a particular mindset of an impact player that we as the audience and listeners as well can apply right now to be certain that they are an impact player?
Mm. Well, well, there were 13 kind of differences in behavior or mindset between impact players and others. The There's a cluster of them that are really hard to change about people. And let me focus on those. One of those is a very strong sense of agency, a sense of I'm in charge, not like I'm in charge of everybody. And it's not this
Yes.
need for control. It's this sense of I have some control, at least some semblance of
Yes.
control
Mhm.
over what is happening in my life, or at minimum, I'm in control of how I respond,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
which for me was one of the gifts I got from having a bit of a difficult father is I
Right.
could either just let him be in charge of how our relationship was, or I could take charge of it. And
Mhm.
I
Exactly.
remember it's a moment where he decided, he kind of needed to separate himself. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's definitely not how this is going to play out. Like, you are not going to go your own way. You're my father. I'm your daughter. I love you. You love me. We are going to stay in a relationship forever. And I'm just like, nope, not how that's going to play out. My dad just like starts to cry
Mhm.
because it's what he wanted, but it's what he didn't know how to do. And I just said,
Yes.
like, no, I'm in charge of at least how I bring myself into that relationship. It's a sense of agency. It's also a low sense of hierarchy.
Mm.
It's rather than, gee, let me wait for the higher ups, let me defer to the higher ups.
Mhm.
It's this belief that I can take charge of a situation even if I'm not the one in charge.
Wow.
I don't have to wait for, you know, the supervisor to tell me what
Yes.
to do. I can
Yes.
decide. I have a lot of control over my own self. And one of my here's one of my favorite examples of this. You asked for an
Please.
example. This is a young woman. Her name is Nadia Popovici, and
Mhm.
I read about her in several articles. 22 years old, an aspiring physician at the time this happened. She's an ice hockey fan, and she lives
Mhm.
in the Seattle area, and she is at a Seattle Kraken ice hockey game. She goes to the home games with her parents, and she is sitting behind the player box,
Okay.
behind the plexiglass box
Yes.
that the hockey players sit in. It's
Mhm.
not her team, it's the opposing team. In this case, it's the Vancouver Canucks. And
Okay.
she notices on the back of the neck of one of the coaches, it's the assistant equipment manager, a man named Brian Hamilton. He's got a mole on the back of his neck, and it looks troublesome to her. She's 22. She has been preparing to apply to medical school. She has been working as a volunteer nurse's assistant. And in that capacity, as a volunteer, she learns about signs of melanoma and signs of, troublesome cancerous moles. And she sees this mole in the back of his neck, and she's worried about it.
Yes.
And like, Joshua, in that moment, like, what would most of us do?
Mhm.
We would say, well, that's not really my place. I'm not a doctor. I
Mhm.
don't know this man. It's the opposing team.
Mhm.
It's, there's a big plexiglass wall
Precisely.
between
Yeah.
us. There's a hockey game
It's
going on, and there's a
it's not
bunch
your
of big
business.
burly people in this box that like are armed with sticks. Like, this is
Mhm.
none of my
Exactly.
business.
Exactly.
But that's not what she did. She
Mhm.
got out her phone and she types a message on her phone that says the mole on the back of your neck is possibly cancerous. Please go see a doctor.
No way.
And
Okay.
she even highlights keywords in red like mole neck cancerous doctor, and she starts banging her phone on the plexiglass trying to get his attention. And he kind of brushes it off like, weirdo or
Okay.
overexcited fan.
Of course.
She does everything in her power to get his attention. They don't converse about this.
Uh-huh.
um, she goes home from the game. He leaves, and at some point he thinks, I wonder if I should go get that checked out. And he does. It is indeed a cancerous mole, and the doctor said, "You're really lucky you caught this now. We can treat this, but if this had gone another year or two, it would probably be life ending for you."
Oh my.
He and the team reached out on social media, got a hold of this fan, and brought her to the a game so he could thank her for the impact that she had on him. And the team spotlighted
Wow.
her and the contribution she had made during an intermission, and they awarded her a $10,000 scholarship to medical
Wow.
school.
Oh my goodness. Come on. Wow. That's
Come
beautiful.
on. And it's beautiful. And I think a lot about that because I think it is so emblematic of what I saw in these impact players is,
Hmm.
you know, yeah, it's not her job, but someone needs to do this little job of
Right.
alerting to him. It's not the place, it's not her place.
Exactly.
Instead of waiting for her to be appointed, as a doctor or put in like as a team position, she's like I can just step up and offer a little bit of leadership in this moment, and I can just start this conversation. She uses this as a moment of impact, and I think that captures what we see in these impact players. They take charge. They're not the kind that need to be in charge of everything, but when a situation requires somebody to step up, they do.
I think that's one of my most favorite stories I've ever heard on the show. It's just such a great turn of events, and it's such a great example of what you just mentioned. It's like agency, and it's not always like just being in charge, but taking charge of that situation because you know that I can. It may not be my place, it may not be the time, but with what I know I can make an impact on this right now. And it would be a disservice of myself and others if I do not make that impact right now. And
I,
go ahead.
oh, Dasha, I just wanted to jump in on the word you said. It would be a disservice.
Yes.
And service was one of the themes that came up in this research is that people who have a lot of impact see themselves as serving others. They see themselves as in a service role, regardless of where that role is. Like, my job is to solve problems. My job is to create, like, to use my influence to create impact for others. And it's this service orientation.
Wow.
And I worry that maybe as a society, we're losing um, a sense that to serve is to do something that is noble.
Precisely. And we also shy away from serving, right? Because the concept of serving seems to be like a concept of like putting yourself below, right? It's become such a common
Subservient.
subservient, right? It's always synonymous to that. But service is actually, it is quite noble. We did lose that kind of impact, we lose that kind of definition of that word. And I love that. I love that story. Thank you for telling that story, Liz. And it's a great reminder to me because agency, or that trait of taking charge, resonates with me right now with our situation, our family, and like, you know, um, with instead of waiting for the grown-ups to take charge of the situation, I know I can already do some impact and make some change right now, but I've always shied away. And it's a great reminder that if you can just step in, and again, it would be a noble service to do that for yourself as well, because it's your gift, it's your gift, and you're giving that gift to the world. I love that story, Liz. I'm just putting it out there. I love it. Thank you so much.
Mm.
As much as I do want to kind of keep unraveling all of those traits, I would like to instead invite our audience and listeners to check out the book Impact Players, written by Liz herself. Liz, as we near an end into this, I would love to ask this question, and I always wrap up with this question. What does the future look like for Liz Wiseman? What are your future aspirations? How do you see yourself, you know, continuously impacting leadership management, continuously impacting transformative, organization culture? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years or so, 5 to 10 years?
Mm. Well, I've written 4 books and I've gotten into this cycle of research, write, teach, repeat. And I'm going to continue doing that because each one of them is like a new S curve and a new challenge. And I'm starting a new, so I'm going to continue to teach people what I'm learning about what the best leaders do and what leaders do to bring out the best in others and what we can do to have an impact in the world. We are dealing with epidemic levels of burnout and disengagement. And,
Mhm.
we often think burnout is a result of people having too much to do. And I think our societies are on the cusp of making this conclusion that like work is bad and that somehow work hurts us and
Mhm.
leads to burnout. I find in all my research that people don't tend to burn out because they have too much to do. I think people are burning out because they have too little impact.
There you go. Yes, exactly.
And I'm going to continue to research like how do we create environments where people can show up,
Mhm.
play big,
Mhm.
take the lead, and are deeply engaged,
Mhm.
perhaps even all in, but in a way that doesn't create burnout. It creates engagement. It's a
Precisely.
little bit tiring, but totally exhilarating. And I'm kind of biting off the next piece of that, trying
Wow.
to understand, how some of our early experiences in our career shape the way we show up for years to come.
Precisely. And it's like creating an environment where it feels purposeful, it feels meaningful, the work that we do. Because I think anyone who feels like their work is making an impact, their work is having a meaning in everything, it's easy to see people are more motivated by that. I am excited for the book title you're going to come up with that concept. Do you have any idea, Liz?
Oh yeah, the book will probably be called Imprint, because we're going to look at some of the what tends to imprint us and how that imprinting affects the way we think and the way we work. But who knows? It could
It
take a
might
very, very
change.
different turn.
Precisely,
Who
precisely. I'm
knows?
just I'm just pretty shocked that you already have a placeholder title. I was kind of kidding, but you already knew. You're so smart and bright and all that, and I'm like really, really, really happy to have you on here, Liz. I would love to give you this opportunity to let us know where can we find you, where can we connect with you, where can we keep
Mm.
updated with your latest, and we'd love to know when this new book is coming out. Where can we stay updated, Liz?
Oh, new book's not coming out for a long
Long
time. So
time.
give me, don't pressure me, Joshua. Give me some space. I am. Um, I'm easy to find, but all of the work sort of sits on thewisemangroup.com.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
people can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to
Yeah.
find there. And, if you want more information on the books, multipliersbooks.com, impactplayersbook.com.
Mhm. All right. Thank
I
you.
think a simple Google search should help people get to the right place.
For sure, absolutely. Liz, thank you so much for being in on here. Thank you so much for your time. And for our audience and listeners out there, I invite you to check out those books, check out what Liz has done, and all the videos actually that I've watched on what you talk about has already left such an impression on me. I was quite excited to have you on here today. Liz, thank you for coming on here. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And Joshua, thank you for continuing to go by your name, Joshua, and not shortening it to Josh. Not that I have any issues with this in my home.
It's so funny because we were actually really talking about this. Like when I started all this show, I had to ask all my friends. I was like, do I complete it? Do I use the entire name Joshua, or do I use just Josh? And at the end of the day, I we all came to a conclusion, or at least me, where I told myself like, this is the name my beloved late mother gave me, so I will keep it.
Mm.
I will wear it with pride, and I will do her proud. Liz,
No, that's beautiful. I should also say that the book Impact Players. I just want to open up, show you one thing before we wrap up here. Um, where is this? Huh. Oh, there we go. The dedication page to the three Joshuas. So to the three Joshes. So the book is dedicated to the three Joshes. So you will be the fourth in there. But I have a son named Josh. I have a son-in-law named Josh. And then I have sort of a friend adopted son named Josh. And so at our
oh man,
house, at any given time, there can be three Joshes.
Liz, that is lovely. I would love nothing more than be the fourth Josh in that in that list. But that's lovely. I am truly touched by that. Liz, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for the stories you brought and for the insight and the wisdom. And to all
Thank
our
you for inviting me.
absolutely to all our audience listeners out there, see you on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.